want to welcome everyone. Um, Welcome to The Kids Are Not Okay, practicing empathy for everyone, even yourself, with Gab Bonesso, provided by the PA Care Partnership Grant in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, also known as OMSAUS. During the presentation, please type your questions into the Q&A feature, which you will find by running your mouse along the bottom of your Zoom screen. When you put your questions in the Q&A, please let us know if you'd like to ask your questions live. We will bring you up on the screen, and you can talk to Gab sort of in person, virtually in person, if you will. Today's moderators are part of the PA Care Partnership. Myself, Jamal Ford, will be Q&A and monitoring. Chat will be Nancy Massey, our social marketing expert. Nancy, take it away.
We are just so excited to have Gab Bonesso here today. Since we had a few minutes to talk before we officially started, I'm already psyched. And where I would normally be calm and we'd say the right things, I'm going to go for it. What I love about Gab is that she's here to educate us, but she's also quite entertaining. Gab wrote this article, the American Academy of Pediatrics recently declared a national emergency in children's mental health, and Gab wants to talk to us about it. Our comedian, mental health motivational speaker, Gab Bonesso, personally understands childhood trauma. She has also spent the last decade visiting schools with her anti-bully rock and roll assembly program, known as the Josh and Gab Show. That would be up towards her, more towards Pittsburgh. In her presentation today, The Kids Are Not Okay, Practicing Empathy for Everyone, even yourself, Gab will share stories from parents, teachers, and students that she's interviewed on this subject since getting all fired up from reading that article. Here's what we know. Every single human on the planet has been affected by the pandemic. Gab, who is known for being high energy, real, raw, and hilarious, we'll discuss times in her life when she was suffering and empathy was the thing she craved most from others. Many of us will relate to that. Gab suggests that perhaps the one thing we can collectively do is practice empathy for everyone, including ourselves. Take it away, Gab.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, OMSAUS, PA Cares, for having me back. And thank you to every single one of you who is tuning in right now to watch me virtually. This means to the world. Those of you who have seen me before, last year when I spoke for PA Cares, it was more just my personal story, me being a comedian. And this year it is a little different. And I could imagine like seeing my name on the roster, specifically speaking about kids. You might have been like, well, why Gab? Like, you know, what does she have to talk about in this subject? And surprisingly, I think I have a lot. Like Nancy mentioned, the core source of all of my mental health started in childhood through trauma. So I have that type of insight. Beyond that, I have spent 10 years going into schools with an anti-bully program, which is different than any other assembly program I've ever seen. And according to teachers, they've ever seen too. And I've got to meet your kids. You know, it's an interesting, unique place for me to come from. So I was very excited that I could speak on this subject. So I want to talk a little bit about my experiences as a school visitor, because I think that alone has been unique, especially as someone who, I'm not a student, I'm not a mom, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a social worker. Like I am truly like an entertainer who's gone through being bullied and has gone through mental health issues. And I get to go to schools. They have parking spots for me. It's called School Visitor. That's who I am. I've done it for 10 years. And it's a really unique thing. And so it started, I'm just gonna start with that. Let's just start with that journey. So that journey started in 2012 for me. I created an anti-bully program called the Josh and Gab Show. The only other member of the anti-bully program is a guy named Josh. Clearly, we're very clever when coming up with names. He had a background in music. I obviously have a background in comedy and theater. My best friend actually sort of curated our duo. She was studying to be a principal at the time in a school outside of Pittsburgh. They had been bringing in anti-bully assembly programs. none of which were really resonating with the kids. It was kind of either very super depressing and not at all like engaging the kids in a way that they can maybe understand in a safer way, or it was just people who are kind of out of touch from being bullied. And at the time, my best friend had known I had been bullied. I had been working with this musician. We were doing like just little YouTube videos together. And she was like, what if you two created an anti-bully program based on your stories of being bullied? And so we took the challenge and we threw this little show together. We spent a couple months in my mother's garage with like poster board, writing music about times I was bullied, times he was bullied. Like every song is like a true life thing that happened to us, but we do it in a way where kids can get up and dance to it or clap along, you know, and every song has like a positive message. So we come into schools and it's like this, like it's a music concert essentially with like motivational speaking, where I keep it real. I keep it as real as I did last year talking about my mental health, but I'm telling these kids stories about being bullied. And right away, it was kind of amazing how quickly we gained popularity. I had a different job at the time. I was working for American Eagle, doing all their corporate training videos, hosting live events. Within our first year of the Josh and Gab show, we got so busy, I had to quit doing that. And Josh and Gab became my full-time living. And we have gone to over 19 different states, and we've been to Mexico with this assembly program. But what was so fascinating for me as this person who doesn't have kids, had been out of school quite a bit, was getting to see how different schools in our country are. I mean, so different. There's such a disparity. I always thought like, oh, all public schools are the same. They're not at all. So that was a real learning thing for me. The other thing I learned was like each school has their own way of doing things. Whereas like, you know, a school might be like, we call the kids who act mean towards others bullies. Whereas another school might be like, we don't like the word bully, Gab. So in your program today, can you call them bucket dippers? Because they're dipping out of other people's buckets, essentially, you know? So like that was interesting to me that like the way we talk about bullying is different. I also found it super interesting. So keep in mind, this is 2012. I'm starting an anti-bully program. And for me, I found that the reason bullying was becoming a pandemic in our country was part of because it got really scary, right? Kids were sadly taking their own lives. And right away, I was being told by schools, we're not discussing mental health. You're going to come into a school and you're going to tell kids not to be bullies, but we're not going to go that next step about the mental health part. And that was really kind of like, oh, okay, because I think it's important. And here and there during like a Q&A, I might eke out that I had like a mental health thing. And I would hear kids be like, me too, Gab, you know, but it wasn't part of the show yet. Okay, so that took time to develop. So for years, we're doing this full time. It's amazing. It's rewarding. During the Q&As or during any time I got to interact with the kids, because I'd have a wireless microphone. So I would actually go out and hear what the kids had to say about being bullied. These kids would open up in ways that it's a tragedy to me that I didn't have a documentary crew with me at every single show, because kids would say things that the school didn't even know were going on. Kids would talk about their emotions live in the middle of a show. And it was amazing to me. And the more real I would be, the more real they would come back. And schools were learning things and I was learning things. I mean, there were so many shows that I couldn't leave the building without making sure I went to a teacher saying like, you heard what they just said. They're being severely bullied and they're not getting help and it's causing depression. Like, please tell me you're going to call their mother. Please tell me you're going to get involved. I mean, kids would tell me that level of stuff in a 45-minute assembly program where half the show's music and dancing. Like I right then was feeling very blessed with this job. Like I was getting to learn about children in a way that the kids trusted me because I went through stuff as a kid so they could relate to me, but I had the wisdom of an adult so I could step back and be like, oh, wow, kids really need to talk. Like that's what I was taking away. And that was just during the anti-bully movement back in 2012, 2013, 2014. I could see kids had a desperate need to be heard, to be validated, for their story to be heard to someone, and me to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened. How can we help? What can I do? And it made a difference. And our program did really well. I mean, we were, by 2015, in a year with 365 days, we had shows on 325 of those days. Okay. I mean, we were performing so much. We were both losing our voice constantly. I don't think I've ever worked harder in my life. I also want to say, like, when you do assembly programs, And if this is different, please call me, because like you don't get paid very well. Like at least we don't. Like in order to get money for an assembly, often the PTO does a cupcake drive. And so the kids buy cupcakes and that's how you bring in. So we don't make a ton of money for as hard as we work, but it's worth it because we were making a difference. At least I felt like we were making a difference. And in 2015, my mother passed away. The amount of work we were doing, it was just all kind of becoming very overwhelming. By 2016, my business partner, his situation changed and he had to leave our show. So it suddenly went from the Josh and Gab show to Gab Squad. And I don't know if it was just how the world was in 2016 or just because my whole journey is rooted in childhood trauma, mental health started becoming a part of the Gab Squad. I would talk about it. I would be more open about it. I would explain that when what might seem like an overreaction to bullying was rooted in a trauma that had happened years prior, it gave a little bit more understanding to these stories. And kids could then say, Gab, I have anxiety. Gab, I have this. And before I knew it, I was being invited back to the schools just to do mental health talks. So I was like, okay, now by 2016, this is something we can talk about. We're allowed to talk about mental health in schools now. This is great. It felt so promising. And it was going that way. And then this little thing called a pandemic happened and no one was going to school. No one. They weren't going to school, students, teachers. I mean, you remember the beginning of the pandemic, we were all there. It was like, we didn't know what to do. No one knew what to do. So sometime in March, I want to say like mid-March of 2020, they just shut everything down. They were just like, okay, we're not going to schools anymore. And even at that point, they didn't have like virtual, like they didn't figure out their virtual education system. So in a way, it was sort of like, oh my gosh, this pandemic is so major. We don't know what to do. Just shut down the schools. We can't worry about that now. Okay. I just want you to hear that part though. Like we can't worry about that right now. We have to worry about this pandemic. Okay. So that's the first part of that school year. And that little part I think is going to come back later. And I say that because when there's a moment of crisis and trauma, and we're just trying to figure out what's the best thing to do and what's safe, and we're, biting our nails, and we're like, okay, close the schools. We'll worry about that next year. We got to get this hold on COVID. Think about that to a kid in school who hates school, a kid who has a bad attitude already about school. And now in March of 2020, everyone's like, and we're not worried about this right now. Now, you don't have to worry about that. We have more things to worry about than school. Okay, I'm just saying that maybe by 2021, when they're coming back to school, their attitude is even worse than it was before. I'm just saying these are little parts of trauma where people react differently. So we have this beginning of the trauma, schools are shut down. I'm just going to speak personally. I didn't have a therapist when the pandemic started. I did not have a therapist at that time. I went into a complete manic episode where I was like, I got this. I've been through trauma my whole life. I was built for a pandemic. I got all manic, like I could handle this. And by December of 2020, I was crashing and I needed a therapist desperately. So while our entire world is going through collective global trauma, I finally seek out a therapist who can help me with every issue I have. Up until this point, I've only ever really been treated for bipolar disorder, but I knew that trauma was the root of my bipolar disorder. Trauma has been the root of every issue in my life. So this time was like, I'm getting a therapist who can help me with trauma. And I was going through one with the entire world. So while we're all going through this global trauma, I'm finally starting to be treated for trauma, which was amazing, eye-opening, changing the way I was seeing everything, seeing myself, seeing others, seeing how we were all reacting in this world. It was really, really interesting. So I started doing that. It's the 2020-21 school year is about to begin. Okay. So now schools have figured out, we can't do what we did in the spring. We have to have virtual education, and we'll have to have remote learning, in-person learning, because some parents want their kids in, some people don't. It was this hybrid educational system. This is the beginning of I just want to say too, if you're watching right now and you work in education, you are anything, a teacher, a custodian, I don't care if you work in a school, I'm so sorry. You've gone through more than most in the last couple of years. I have nothing but respect for people in your situation. Same for therapists, social workers. You've all been just at bat every single day. And I have nothing but like immense respect for you. So the beginning of that school year starts, and right away, there's so much animosity, like animosity, not among the kiddos necessarily, but among the parents. I mean, you remember this. I'm not saying anything that's like controversial. You turned on your news and there are parents who are like, I want my everyday kids should be in person. Other parents, kids should not be going back to school. Like everybody knew what was right, right? Everyone is fighting for their own individual cause. There's tons of animosity. And I'm thinking, like, just as a school visitor who now is being told, you can't come into school. We're going to open up schools, but we're not letting you back, you know? And I'm like, why can't I go back? I need to work too, you know? So I'm like bitter, trying to like check my own emotions during this trauma, because I'm like, I'm still worried about the kids. I'm seeing the parents like getting really angry about issues that are clearly important, and they're clearly going through trauma too, and their amygdalas are overreacting and they just want to do what's best for their kid. But me as a school visitor who's been going to schools about the anti-bully movement, all I'm thinking is, this is gonna lead to some more bullying in the schools, isn't this? Because it's going to become a thing, right? Like you're either team mask or you're not team mask. You believe in COVID, you don't believe in COVID. I mean, it's going to be a thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I'm thinking, so they're not going to have any support for anti-bullying. They're not even going to be talking about it. I'm like, is there going to be support for mental health? Well, probably not, because they're just trying to figure out how they're going to do this hybrid educational system. I mean, the pressure on the schools, teachers, I mean, it was intense. And I'm saying this as someone who's living alone in my apartment, not getting to perform, trying to stay as sane as I can, and just worrying for everybody else. So that's like the school side of it. Then there's the parents, right? I have so many people I know who have kids and they have to work. And so suddenly it's like, well, someone has to be home if they got to stay home and do school. You need to stay home and do school. And now parents are deciding which job is more important. I mean, so you know, those discussions are happening in the house. Suddenly it's a fight as to who's going to stay home to help their child go to school. Once again, if you're a kid with a bad attitude about school and now mom and dad are fighting about it, do you really like school anymore? I'm just saying, these are things that could add and lead to where we were at the beginning of this year. So that school year was tough. It was difficult. I think it was hard on everyone. It was hard on everyone. And I still had to stay, you know, on the periphery, on the outside, couldn't come into schools. I'm just watching it all as a human being who's now learning about trauma, learning about it, you know, about my own life and how it has affected me and how it affected others when, like, you know, there've been traumas in my family that we all went through together, and how 5 people could go through the same exact trauma, but every one of us acts differently because trauma is in the eye of a beholder. So I was starting to see that sort of thing. Like when I would see, I don't know, people get really angry, like letting their anger take over during this period. It always made me think of my one brother who could be very emotionally abusive during really horrible times. He was emotionally abusive to me throughout my whole life, but during moments of tragedy, I always said he takes a bad moment and he makes it 1,000 times worse. And it really would make things worse for me in my little personal tragedy, right? So I'm now seeing that happening outside to everyone on the news. People are angrier. We're finding more road rage. I mean, do you remember this? There's been more road rage. People are pulling out. I mean, it was just, violence was everywhere. I mean, we were going through trauma, and this is what was happening. That's a realistic reaction to a global pandemic and global trauma. And it was wild. I felt like a fly on the wall, kind of like watching it all, not really a part of it because I'm not in those situations, you know? So it was really like, I'm here, but I'm not. And because it was the pandemic, we were all so isolated. I mean, you were constantly being told not to leave the house, don't touch plastic. I mean, so many things we had been told, and you can't hug your loved ones. If you love your elderly aunt, you won't go see her. You know, like all of these things you're hearing, and then you go on social media and you see people going out or seeing their family, and then you're like, I hate them. Or it was the other way, people masking in their house, and people are like, why are you wearing a mask to do a Zoom video? You know, like every side was full of anger. And it was kind of depressing to me on one end, because I was like, wow, like this is, obviously this is a realistic response to trauma, right? Anger is a realistic response for some people, but it does tend to make things worse for other people. And I was seeing that, and I was seeing people having difficulty. And I was hearing too many people say to me, I hate everyone. People stink, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Like it was just a negativity that was like enveloping even the kindest people I've known. I mean, even me, I'm not some like, first of all, this is called practicing empathy because I'm still working on it. Okay. I'm not some like perfect empath who walks through the world and is like, yes, I understand why you just victimized. No, I got it all too. Okay. It's a constant effort. It's constant practice, but it's, I would just try to look at things. Perfect example. So I start with this new therapist, right? And we start in December of 2020 before there's a vaccine, but that fall they did send kids back to school. And we were really making good progress right away. And as soon as the school year started, my therapist would have to keep canceling my sessions. And she would cancel them for a good reason. Her kids' school shut down. Her kids' daycare shut down. Someone in the school got COVID, so they all would have to quarantine, whatever the reason, right? These are good reasons. But I'm suffering, and I'm hired this woman to help my brain, not to help her kids, right? So like there were moments where I was just like, she cancels again. I'm done with this woman. Meanwhile, she's helping me so much, right? She's really helping me, but my selfish, you need to be here for me. However, on the other hand of this, my best friend had just had a baby at the beginning of COVID. I knew the stress that was on her and her husband. I was like, whatever you need, I will be there to help you. And when people would be cruel to my friend, if she needed to not be at work because she had to be with her baby, I would be mad at those people. How can they not understand the pressure of being a mom? Oh, wait. So I want people to have empathy for Bethany for the same reason I'm ready to fire this woman who is saving my life. Hey, Gab, maybe give the same empathy you give to Bethany, your therapist. She deserves it too. And then think about that, your therapist. Oh my gosh, what has this last year been like for her? Can you imagine being a therapist during a pandemic, which then causes global trauma? This poor woman. I came into my next session and I was like, hey, I just want to say thank you for doing this. Sorry if I've ever seemed not like grateful, and holy crap, what you've been through. I really admire you and thank you. She was so touched. Like literally, she's like, she almost like started crying. She's like, I just feel like people don't realize that therapists are people too. I'm like, I never did until literally this pandemic. And it's true, I didn't. I always held therapists at these like high expectations. No, I hire you to help my brain. You don't get to mess with my brain. Like that's how I would, like it's my amygdala, a lifetime of trauma. And not only did I have my own lifetime of trauma, side note, trauma can be, I don't want to say it's genetic, but like, so in the case of my mother, she went through extreme childhood trauma that defined her thinking. My mother's entire being was trauma informed. Therefore, her parenting was also trauma informed. So I was already having an amygdala that was there to protect me because my mother gave it to me. I mean, as a 5-year-old, my mother told me not to go in the woods behind our house. And you're probably thinking, oh, well, you're 5. You shouldn't go in the woods. She said that up through my whole life. Don't go in the woods behind our house. Why, you want to know? Oh, okay, I'll tell you. Because 10 years before I was even born, in those woods, in the township we lived in, there had been a serial killer. And he killed 2 teens in those woods a decade before I was born, and they had caught the guy. But I could never go in those woods because of a serial killer. So like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like my whole, like I grew up already afraid of everything because that's how I was raised. So trauma can truly affect and can have lasting effects on the next generation, even if they didn't even go through a trauma. Lucky for me, went through my own trauma. So I got it coming all ways, guys. Got it coming all ways. So in trauma therapy, some of the stuff I was learning that I just want to share because I think a lot of people don't know about this. I didn't know about it, is like when your amygdala is trying to protect you, it can do different forms of thinking, right? So like all or nothing thinking. And I do that all the time, or I used to do this all the time, where I'd be like, everybody hates me. I'll never get booked. I can't get a show. Nobody likes me. The world's against me. It was all or nothing, right? It was like, or maybe that one venue doesn't like you because you talk about mental health. It doesn't mean everyone doesn't like you. You get to do conferences. Like, whoa, let's time out those thoughts. And like learning to stop that kind of thinking has really helped me. I'm not saying that I don't have those thoughts. I just stop them a lot quicker. But so I'm learning about all or nothing. And then I'm watching what's happening with this pandemic. And I hate to keep going back to masks, but that became like such a point of rage for people. And at the end of the day, like, I don't even want to talk about my opinion on it, because I don't even know what my opinion on it is. I'm not a scientist, man. You want me to wear a mask? I wear a mask. You don't want me to wear a mask? I won't wear a mask. Just come on, man. Like, let's stop this. But like that kind of all or nothing, I just saw it happen where someone would be like, oh, look at that person wearing a mask. The mask mandate ended. You don't need to wear that unless you're a liberal lemming. And it's like, man, that person's not even a Democrat. Like, that's my Republican friend who has cancer. Like, that's why they're wearing a mask. Like, you're doing this all or nothing thinking that everyone who wears a mask is this. Well, no, that we should never think like that, because that's never healthy or accurate. And it goes the other way, right? Anyone who doesn't wear a mask is a murderer. And it's like, okay, let's calm down a second. How about this person is like double vaxxed and boosted, also has like has some type of disorder that they can't keep the mask on. Like, there's a lot of reasons for a lot of things, but if we're always thinking in extremes, these all or nothing, yeah, there's going to be a lot of fighting, and there's going to be a lot of anger, and there's going to be a lot of this stuff going on. Okay, I wanted to say that about the all or nothing, because I think it's really important to like some of these things, like mind reading was another thing I learned about trauma, where you think you know what the other person's thinking, and then you're reacting to that, but they haven't even said anything. And I was doing that. I can honestly admit I would do that. There'd be times I would go into the store and it could go either way. I would have my mask on and maybe no one else had a mask on. And I'm like, I'm gonna get beaten. They're all gonna kill me. They all hate me. No one here likes me. They think I like, whatever. I would like start spinning out that way. Or if I was at the store and I just wasn't thinking and I needed to get brownie mix and there was someone looking at the cookie mix. And so I went over and I didn't give them their 6 feet. And I'm like, oh no, she thinks that I have no respect for, and I would mind read, and it would amp my anxiety through the roof. And none of it was real. None of it was happening. It was just a response that my amygdala, it was wild. It was wild. But I could step back and go, okay, so if I'm doing that, that's what that person's doing. And when that person just flipped out on that person, it's their amygdala. They're scared. They're just trying to save themselves. They're trying to save their kids. They're trying to save anything. Like, that's all it is, right? Like, that was the root of the anger and the root of the sadness and the root of the anxiety was fear, was wanting to live, was protecting yourself and not your people, just your people. I mean, I get it. There's no judgment in any of this. I'm almost saying it because sometimes people won't say it, like perfect example. So spring of 2021, things start opening up. I'm still not allowed to go back into schools. And that was really weird for me. I'm going to be honest, just like Gab being selfish. I was sort of like, well, wait a minute. So you're letting teachers go in and you're letting kids go in, but you can't figure out a way to do an assembly. You're telling me these kids don't need some fun right now. You're telling me these kids don't just need to hear some songs and they can dance in their little bubble. Like, it was really like, I was getting like bitter, but then at the same time being like, Gab, it's not about you. You know what I mean? Like, if that's not what's best for the kids, then you don't want to bring your program into the schools right now. So it's time, like, we will do virtual, but we're just going to wait. We're going to wait. And I, honestly, like, I do work enough as a performer that I was able to collect unemployment. So it wasn't like I was broke. Thank you, state of Pennsylvania. I was able to, to make a living while I was not allowed to make a living. But by spring of 2021, I was allowed to go back, at least into comedy clubs and venues like that. And the reason I want to say this is because my opening line these days when I do stand-up is I talk about the pandemic and I say that I don't want to be selfish or act like something good has come out of the pandemic. But for me, someone who's only done stand-up comedy that's rooted in mental health, having a global pandemic and everyone now having mental health issues has given me my first chance at being Ray frickin' Romano. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the first time I can maybe be a mainstream comic because everybody loves therapy. So I open up with this line. In 2021, May of 2021, people would look at me like I was talking crazy talk. Like, what trauma? Huh? It was just a little thing. Like that, like I was the one who was just making something up. Like I'm the only one who was, having a traumatic reaction to it. And I was like so confused. Like I'd just be like, so I wouldn't let it go, because if you know me, I can't just like leave it. I'm like, wait a minute. You don't think you went through a trauma? How many people didn't get to go to work? How many people, their kid did this? How many? And then before you know it, everyone has their hands. I'm like, that's trauma. It's trauma. But you can't be mad at people for not understanding it, because once again, paralleling my own story and trauma, I referenced this older brother that was emotionally abusive to me. I didn't know until this therapist that was trauma. And I swear to God, I didn't know. I didn't know. Yes, my brother is 20 years older than me. So when I was 12, he was 32, a grown man living in my house. Yes, he verbally abused me, said things that you wouldn't say to anyone, especially a child. Put such fear in me that I've lived in an utter state of panic my entire adult life. Also, like every other sibling I had was afraid of this brother. My mother was afraid of this brother. No one ever told my father the things this person did. Like, it was like this gaslighting situation. So I'm in therapy while we're in this pandemic, and I'm just telling stories about my childhood, like not even thinking anything. And she's like, whoa, wow. So that was a lot of trauma. And I'm like, oh, what was? Oh, well, your brother and the way he treated you. Oh, well, no, it can't be trauma if it's your brother. It's just a sibling rivalry. Yeah, it's not sibling rivalry when he's 32 and you're 12 and he's calling you every name in the book and shaming you for going through menstruation. No, that's not like, and I have hundreds of stories, not one, but I didn't know. I didn't know. So like, how can I be surprised at an audience who has no idea that this has been trauma when I lived through it for my entire childhood and had no idea? Because like I went through this other trauma when I was 5 and that was like major. So that to me was trauma, not like not being scared to be in my house. That's just having a mean brother. Like I just didn't know. So when I talk about trauma now, I try to do it in a way where I don't know, where people, I don't know, people are more open to hearing about it. Also, I think I need to state this because this is something that has frustrated me my entire life in regards to trauma. It's frustrated me in terms of my mother's story. It frustrates me as a school visitor when I go into schools and maybe someone will talk about a kid's life as though the kid has done something wrong because of maybe their parents' lifestyle. We have to stop with this shame that goes along with trauma. My mother didn't want people to know about her childhood because she thought she'd be judged. The actions of someone's parents should not be then taken on to the child, right? Like just because a child has a parent that ends up in jail, that child should not be treated as the person who ended up in jail. Also, just because someone ends up in jail, one, doesn't mean they did anything. Two, there's nothing is just black and white, right? So maybe we have to think a little bit differently about stuff. We need to get rid of the shame that comes with trauma. Also, another thing that my therapist has really helped me with that I just want to share is I understanding that we all react to trauma differently. That's so important. It's so important. But also that because someone goes through trauma and maybe can't recover as quickly, right? Maybe it sticks with them. Maybe it manifests in different ways. We have to stop acting as though that person had the wrong reaction to trauma, right? Like just because like I had someone who verbally assaulted me throughout my childhood. And I don't like, I would be this kind of person all the time. Like I called it hummingbird energy. I'm scared. Oh God, is he home? What kind of mood is he in? That kind of lifestyle, right? Like, I don't know that I'm somehow weak-minded because that was my reaction to abuse. You know what I'm saying? Like, and my therapist, like she gives me that. She's like, you're right. You're not weak-minded. That's a fair reaction to abuse, Gab. That's a fair reaction. Like, she validates it. And so when I talk about empathy, it is a lot of validation, like my therapist even asked me this in session, because I was like, I'm doing this big talk and it's about empathy. And she's like, how would you describe empathy to someone, like a kid who doesn't understand it? And I was like, oh, that's great. For me, empathy is hearing them, and then meeting them where they are. You know what I mean? And that's such an interesting position, because I think you can do that even if it's something that you might not agree with, or maybe it's a person that in the past you didn't get along with. I still think we can find empathy even through all of that. And it is with understanding that we all react to trauma differently. But I do think getting rid of the shame would be a very valuable thing in all of this. So, all right. So I get through the spring, I get through doing comedy, the new school year's starting, 2021, 2022. And now I'm being told I can come back into the schools. So this is, to me, I'm very excited, because I'm like, all right, I just want to see where the kids are. I said to my business partner before we did our very first show, I said, I think this season, we would always focus on a theme of anti-bullying. And I was like, I think this season we kind of need, I'm not saying we need to throw anti-bullying out the window, because I still think there's bullying going on, just differently. I said, this season, I think the focus has to be on self-care. And my business partner, who doesn't really do a lot, with mental health, he was like, I agree. He didn't even question. He was like, yeah, I hear you, Gab. I'm like, because I just think after going through all of this, what the kids might need to hear more is how can we love ourselves while everything is, scaring us around us? How do we find time for ourselves? How do we do something nice for us, right? So we started having this lesson in the middle of our show where I explain to kids, when I'm having a bad day, one of my favorite things to do, and this isn't a lie, I don't just say this in schools, I'll say it to you because it's the truth. My favorite thing to do when I'm stressed to the max is I like to either make a blanket fort or a pillow fort. It doesn't have to be huge. I like to make them bigger because I am a grown-up. So I make a big one. It might take up my whole house, not the whole house, but the whole room. And I'll put twinkly lights in it. I'll get I have a bean bag. I get all my favorite stuffed animals, my Pikachu. I'll get my Nintendo out. I'll even get my yoga mat if that's what I want to do. And it's a little safe bubble for me where I can kind of just chill out. It's almost my own little world where I kind of get away from everything else. And that's for me. And then we have a song that goes along with it, which is ridiculous. We took Old Town Road and we turned it into Blanket Fort. Yeah, it's amazing. It's not. But anyway, we do that song. It goes along with it. But before we do the song, I say to the kids, hey, I'm just curious. The last couple of years have been rough. Is there anything that you do to try to make yourself feel better when you're having a hard time or when everything's kind of scaring you? And once again, these kids, they never disappoint me. Gabby, I play the piano. That helps me calm down sometimes. Oh, that's such a great thing to do, because then you can use both hands and it helps your brain process things differently. Oh, that's a great thing to do. Gabby, when I'm having a bad day, I like to talk to my mom. Oh, that is so great that your mom is someone you can talk. And they all just start sharing the different things that they do. And if I don't hear somebody maybe mention exercise, I'll be like, hey, does anyone here play sports or do any kind of exercise? Because that can really help when you have a lot of, and then all the boys raise their head like, yeah, I play, hey, Gab, I like to dirt bike, you know what I mean? And everybody just starts coming in. And in this last school year, I knew something had changed. I mean, even I wish he was here, my friend Josh, just to say yeah, it was different this year. We do middle schools and normally 8th grade boys just sit in the back and they're not going to take part in this musical comedy show. I had 8th grade boys doing the worm, dancing, busting out their Fortnite moves, dabbing at every song. This year, when we came in, the kids weren't just excited to have a show and have an assembly. They were excited to get to be kids for 45 minutes. They were excited that their teachers, for the first time in a whole year, were like, yeah, you know what? You guys can go ahead and get up and dance. Every school let the kids dance this year. I know that sounds small. It's huge. And if you could see how happy these kids were, it was remarkable. And I was like, Josh, to my business partner, I'm like, these poor kids, what has the last 2 years done to them? Look how desperate they are just to be little kids again. Oh my gosh. And so this is the fall, right, of the 2021. At Christmas, I do a show the day before Christmas at a school. It's amazing. It's wonderful. The kids are just, we're all full of hope. And I I pick up the worst stomach bug of my life, the very worst stomach bug I've ever had in my life. So after Christmas going into New Year's, I had 5 days where I couldn't keep food in my body. I could not keep, so I hadn't eaten. I was like depleting, I'm wasting away. It's the end of the year. Now we're hearing this Omicron is coming. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to work again. I've got the stomach flu. I was tested for COVID. I was so scared I didn't have it. And then I read this piece that Nancy mentioned in the New York Times by David Leonhardt. And the title was American Children Are Starting 2022 in a Crisis. And then it begins to say about the mental state of emergency in pediatric mental health. It begins to say how suicide attempts have risen, gun violence against children has risen, behavior problems have risen, and grief. 167,000 children lost a parent or grandparent to COVID. So I know what I know from real life. I have no food in my body, so my brain is maybe not in its best place. I'm reading this piece and sobbing simultaneously, like, I'm truly like, I'm devastated by this. I wait a couple days to when I'm feeling better and I start posting just like parts of the article, thinking like people will reach out to me and be like, whoa, Gab, nothing, like not even a like, nothing. I'm like, then I kind of sit back and I'm like, I follow a lot of people in education, a lot of people in mental health. I want to see if they post this article. I wasn't seeing anything. I end up having a meeting with Nancy and Jamal. I'm like, hey, time out. I know we're talking about all this stuff. Have you read this article? And so I send it to them and Nancy's like, oh my God. And then she sends me an article and then Newsweek does another article. And then it's just like, now everyone's talking about it. And so I'm like, I got to do something. I mean, I have to do something before I get to this talk. I have to like do something for me, start some conversation, because this is everything of my whole life building up to one moment. I mean, I am a survivor of childhood trauma. I am a school visitor who goes in and helps kids try to be kind. I am someone who believes in all of this, and it's just in my nature to want to help. And I did a TED Talk in 2015 all about the anti-bullying movement. And at the end of my TED Talk, I basically say, become the superhero you wish you had when you were a kid. And it was like, that's all I could hear. That's literally all I could hear. And I was like, this is your Gab. It's time to get your cape, girl. This is our mission. And that's kind of where I am right now. Like, I am not going to stop until we talk about this all the time. Now, I want to tell you what I did with this information. I basically started a YouTube series where I was like, I'll just start it off. I'll read some part of this New York Times piece and I'll just tell like what I think we could do to help kids. I put out this video and I never get like a big response on Facebook specifically when I post videos, like never, no one cares. I do comedy videos, whatever. I had like 15 shares in the first like 10 minutes of it being up, and that doesn't happen for me. So I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Then I get tons of private messages. The people who wanted to be interviewed were wonderful people, and I really do appreciate anyone who helped me out on my series. But like the teachers and the parents who had like real stories, they didn't want to be on camera. They didn't want to be on camera. So I'm getting like inundated now with emails and messages like, Gab, I work in a school and you're 100% right. The kids are not okay. But, and then they would tell me 100 different ways where the adult, was not being supported in their school at all, like not at all being supported. Or the parent being like, I'm trying, but I can only do so much. And I don't understand algebra and I can only help my kid to this level. And I need more support. And they were desperate. And then I'm reading articles that social workers and therapists are leaving their profession because they're just, they need more support. And so I'm going to start a video series, The Kids Are Not Okay. And all I'm hearing is, it's because the adults are not okay. The adults are not okay. And I now went from someone who wanted to be the superhero for the kid. And now I just want to say to every human out there, we're the same. Like, it's our trauma that connects us. You know what I mean? Like, instead of us all being like, I like masks, I don't like masks. It's like, okay, we're both having reactions, but how about this trauma we're going through, huh? it's pretty bad, isn't it? Because like, that's the only thing I can think of. And this one book this book, What Happened to You? I don't know if any of you have ever read it. It's by Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And then Oprah went on to do a television series. And that's sort of like, that's kind of the root of this, is that the one connecting thing that all of us have is trauma. And so rather than using it as a thing that separates us, makes us not trust anybody, because we are going to all have a different reaction to trauma, we can use it as almost our connector, right? Our thing that does bring us together, that thing that we do have in common. And and just because I'm seeing people going like, it's on my reading list, another book that I also just recently started reading that I had seen the author on CBS Mornings, it's called Homecoming. It's by Dr. Thema Bryant. Oh my goodness. If you've never been treated for therapy, this is a very good, or treated for trauma, and you've had trauma, this is a great starting point, because she puts homework exercises after every chapter. She even has the ACE trauma quiz that you can take to see if you went through childhood trauma like accurately and have a number 8. Anyway, it's really intense, but it's really, really valuable while you're trying to find yourself a trauma therapist, if that is something that you want to do. And I guess why I keep going back to empathy is because when I think of trauma, I think of times in my life, I think in times of my mother's life. I remember being a little girl and my mom trying to explain how rough her childhood was to me. And she told me these stories where I was probably far too young to understand. But when you think about my mother being a 5-6-year-old going through it, you know, why wouldn't she tell her 5-6-year-old? But I remember my mother telling me a story specifically when she was in first grade, and her teacher had pulled her aside, and not in a nice way, and said, hey, what's going on at your house? You're not bathing. I can see dirt behind your ears. You're not washing back there. Is your mom not at home? What's going on in your house? Like, very aggressive. And my mother was like, no, my mom is at home. My mom's at home. Meanwhile, her mom hadn't been home in months. Her father drove trucks and he hadn't been home. My mom, who's 6 years old, is raising her 2-year-old sister. And it scared, as my mother would say, the bejesus out of her. I don't even know what that means. And so from that point on, my mother was like, as a 6-year-old, was like, I have to make sure I shower every day. I clean behind my ears, and I clean my sister, and I make sure her ears are clean. And I do that. So that way no one, and that was like a level of pressure that my mother had on her. And I remember when she was teaching me to bathe myself saying, you have to clean behind your ears. Because when I was 6 years old, a teacher said it was dirty back there, and they knew that it was something. I mean, talk about that trauma coming into bath time with her 6-year-old, right? Like, that's how deep trauma is. And I know it's hard. And please, teachers, don't think that I'm judging even that teacher in 1950 who did that to mine. There's no judgment. But like, a kid who isn't bathing and their parents might not be home is probably super scared. And maybe the best way to go up to them is like, hey, are you like, has anyone ever taught you like the right way to bathe? Like, maybe in a nicer way, not accusatory. Another memory I had that I had shared with Jamal and Nancy while we were talking about this, that just was like a moment of like trauma in school and how it could help, was I remember being in 6th grade. I was always English was one of my better subjects because I could do creative writing and be creative. And my English teacher was like, okay, everybody get out your paper. And we had a paper that was due. And I had just like totally forgot. That was not like me. And I go immediately into an anxiety attack. Like, oh my God, I forgot it. What's wrong with me? What's wrong? I'm bad. I'm stupid. How can I forget? I'm beating myself up. And then I remember the night before, my brother, who struggled with addiction issues, he had come to the house using, and he and my mother got into a huge fight that turned somewhat violent. I was terrified. I had gone up in my bedroom. I hid in a closet, and I forgot that I had a paper due. And my teacher, instead of like, even though I was a good English student, being like, oh, Gab, did some, she was just, you didn't do it. Lazy, angry at me. I felt shame. I felt horrible. I also knew I couldn't tell her the truth because then it would bring shame, right? Because you can't say you have a brother who's an addict. Shame. There was all of that surrounding it. So I feel like a big, big part to this, a big part to all of us suffering, is practicing this empathy, choosing grace, right? Choosing to give someone grace, not assuming that their intention is always bad or that their action had anything to do with you, right? Like, sometimes people are in a horrible mood, they take it out on you, you're now getting so upset and taking it personally, and it never had anything to do with you. Like, this happened to me during the pandemic. And this is one of my first moments of being able to find empathy for another person in a moment of like crisis. And I was driving home from, you can only go to the store once a month in the beginning of the pandemic. I was driving home. I was driving slowly because I had a lot on my mind. And this guy got aggressive with me and he's honking, getting like just doing everything in his power. We end up getting stopped at a red light and he gets out of his car to come and confront me. And I am, so scared. I'm overreacting. I turn into Daffy Duck. I go to lock my door. And when I hit the lock button, I hit the window and it goes down. I'm like, nah. So now he's like literally right there. I'm like, ah. I'm trying to get the window back up. He's screaming at me. I don't know what to do. He goes back to his car. So I think it's all over. And then he comes back out again. And I don't know if he has something. I don't want to call 911 because this is in the months following George Floyd. And the last thing I want to be deemed a Karen, nor do I want to be a Karen because this could have all been resolved if man would just stay in his car. So I don't even want to be calling 911, but I'm calling 911 because even when you're giving someone grace, you have to take care of yourself and have boundaries. So I'm calling 911 and to the 911 operator, I'm like, this is what happened. This is what's going on, but I don't want anything bad to happen to this guy. I'm just saying, he's probably stressed. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Who knows why he's mad? Like I literally basically became his defense attorney to 911 because all I could think about was what is this guy going through? And let me just say this, don't ever get out of your car. Okay. Watch one episode of Judge Judy. You can't get out of your car. You're wrong, sir. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is I'm not like a perfect driver. I can name like 7 times where I was speeding down Carson Street, following an ambulance so I could get to the hospital at the same time as my mother when she was being rushed to the ER. So I know there are times where, I was driving slowly because I wasn't thinking clearly. Like we all have been there, right? But it's so easy to be like, oh, bad driver. Our fuses are flying. And that's just the case. Some people go through trauma are going to be short fused and be really angry. And some people are going to be out of it. And some people are going to be scared and crying all the time. And some people are going to seek therapy. And some people are going to be like, why do I need therapy? And it's all real and it's all happening. And it doesn't mean that it's not trauma. Okay. So even if you're dealing with someone who's like, I'm good, they're not good, right? You know what's been going on the last 3 years. They're not good. So try, if you can, to practice a little empathy because the only way the kids are going to be okay is if we're okay and we're old enough that we can go ahead and we can try to get the help we need. And I just want to say, I'm rooting for every single person out there. And if there's anything I can do, please feel free to email me, even if it's just like a pump up message to be like, Gab, humankind really is getting me down. I'm like, I know, me too, but we got to keep trying. At one point during the pandemic, and I swear I'm going to wrap this up, I wrote a song for my godson. And it was only because I kept saying, people are mean, 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 because people kept being mean to me. But the point of the song is just because they're mean, that don't have to mean that you and me should be mean too. Not me and you, not me and you. And I'm going to leave you with that. Let's try not to be mean, even if they're being mean. We're better than that. Thanks, everybody. I hope we can try practicing empathy and help the kids and help ourselves.
Gab, I love you. You're awesome. You truly are.
Thank you, Jamal.
You truly are. Before we get into some of the Q&A with some of our participants, I want to give Nancy the opportunity to ask a question.
Thank you, Jamal. I saw something fly by on the chat, and it's a question that's been asked of us many times, too often, and there is no real clear answer. I think we've gotten much better at how can we find resources. And there was one woman, and Jamal, can you grab that message from Jody and throw that in the chat again? Who is giving suggestions on how to get find that therapist trauma oriented in a specific area. So now in the past couple of years, to find those resources, it's gotten better, but they're also in very specific areas. So we don't have an opportunity to say, here's every therapist in Pennsylvania, now sort by area, now sort by type. Not yet, although I expect that it will be coming soon. In the meantime, I'm going to suggest, if this sounds okay with you, Gabby, is that anybody like Jodie Foster, who has an idea of how to get resources within a specific area, if you would throw that in the chat, I'd appreciate it, because I want everyone to be able to have the same opportunities that I've had for therapy, and to have that opportunity to be awakened to the trauma, which is the foundation for what all of us are dealing with. And so anybody, and I know there are plenty of people out there right now who work in the places where these supports can be found in different areas of the Commonwealth. If you could just throw it in the chat, that's my thought. Okay.
Yeah, my therapist had said there's a website. I want to say she said it was called like Trauma Lee. And if you go to that, it like specifically has trauma therapists, and then you can put in your area. And she had also recommended to me to tell people Psychology Today, you can put in your area, and specifically they will tell you people who have are trained in trauma. So those were two advice she had given me just the other day when everybody was asking me for.
I'll look them up and I'll throw them in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I think
Gab.
considered cognitive behavioral therapist is like the
Right.
new.
Right. That's usually most of our CPT. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Honestly, it's changed my life. Like, I don't want to just, it's made such a difference for me. I have been a much happier person treating my trauma. I can honestly say that.
So many things resonated in your presentation with me, Gab, and it's funny. But I want to give our audience a chance to ask questions. So if anyone has any questions for Gab, you can place them in the Q&A section. If you run your mouse along the bottom of the screen, you'll see Q&A. You put your question in there. I'll get it to Gab so that we can get that answered for you. We did have a question based on the answer that Jodie ended up giving for Lena, who was looking for resources for children and therapists. And the second part of that question was, what do you look for in a therapist? And I know that is a sort of a by person kind of question, but I would like to get your thoughts on what you look for in a therapist, and maybe that can help.
No, I love that question, just because I can honestly say this therapist was the first therapist that I actually did some like legwork to find, meaning I didn't just go, who's in my plan? I took the first one and whoever we clicked with. I've had a lot of experience with, I had like the best therapist in Pittsburgh for bipolar therapy. And I had been with her for 11 years. And I truly feel like she gave me everything she could give me. And then I still wasn't feeling good. So I tried a grief therapist, and that didn't really work. So I knew that the one missing element for me was trauma. So I was specifically looking for someone who could treat trauma. But I also needed someone who understood mood disorders, because when I went to my grief therapist, the first thing she said to me was, "You're not bipolar." Well, that's a scary thing since I've been treated for it for the majority of my adult life. What do you mean I'm not bipolar? So I didn't want someone who was going to immediately diagnose me after one conversation. So I wanted someone who understood trauma, someone who understood mood disorders. This is going to sound wild, but it mattered to me. And this is how I got this idea. I watch a show called This Is Us that's set in Pittsburgh. And there's a character on the show named Randall. And Randall is a Black man who is raised by a white family. And so when he would go to therapy, he would go to white therapists. And he finally was like, what if I go to a therapist that looks like me and is like me? So he went to a Black male therapist and his life changed. And I was like, what if I went to an Italian woman therapist who's around my age, like Randall did, because that would really help me, because specifically growing up in a very strong Italian family, there's patriarchy and misogyny that is just intertwined all the time. And I needed a therapist who got that. So I was specifically looking at a woman around my age, Italian, took my health insurance, background in trauma, and could do mood disorders. And it was actually Psychology Today is how I found my therapist. So yeah, and she's incredible. Unfortunately, she has a wait list and she can't take any new clients at the moment. So
thank you for that answer, Gab.
sure.
Rosa asked a question. During the pandemic, we stopped getting used to socializing. How will we support someone who has anxiety with socializing then?
I think that's a great question. And I think what's interesting is like, this might be the first time more people understand that, because I mean, I'm someone who's pretty like, I'm uncomfortable getting to a social situation. Like I would much rather choose staying at home under all circumstances. But when I get there, I will become friends with everybody and you can't shut me up. And even me, I have had such awkward moments in public where I'm just like, I was at a hotel for the first time, like 2 weeks ago, and I needed to go down and ask for a toothbrush. I forgot my toothbrush and I did not know how to even address the concierge. I was just like, hi, visiting from Pittsburgh. Like, I didn't even, I gave a whole background. I was like, and by the way, I have heard you have, I was just like, I don't know how to talk to people anymore. So I almost feel like, if you see someone having difficulty, maybe like walk over and be like, oh, it's kind of a lot of people, huh? Especially after a pandemic. I don't know. Like for me, it always helps to kind of address the elephant in the room sometimes. Like that kind of lets everyone take a deep breath. Like I kind of think like that is one of my superpowers, is I can figure out what the elephant is and then I just blurt it and everyone's like, oh good, Gab said it. Now we don't have to all like be scared about it anymore. So like that's actually one of my good skills, but I would probably walk over if I saw someone super uncomfortable and be like, is it all these people? Is it all the potential COVID? You know, I would be displaying my own like anxiety so that they could see they aren't. You are not alone. That's kind of my whole jam. I just try to keep people knowing they're not alone.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Anna asked, how do you help parents and teachers to get support when health insurance is a barrier?
I know. I mean, I mean, honestly, the things that I think that we need are not gonna, I mean, I'm not trying to be a downer, but they're not gonna happen in our little talk today. Like what needs to happen is there's gotta be a lot more funding going into schools specifically so that every school has a bunch of social workers there on hand to be helping in the moment. I mean, I just think it's bigger than we've ever addressed it before. I mean, we can't ignore this, like especially in the schools. And I think there's going to have to be a shift and much more money going into that. And maybe in a way helping the parents too, because this has been really rough. So maybe there will have to be like before school and after school programs that are available at a low cost for everyone in the community. I mean, I'm blown away by my family, we couldn't afford daycare. I didn't get to go to daycare. Daycare was grandma and grandpa's house. You know what I mean? Like preschool was grandma and grandpa's house. When my mom was like, you don't have to go to preschool. We don't need to do that. You know what I mean? Like if you can't afford it, you can't do it. And that shouldn't be the way, you know, we have enough resources in this country that every kid at their school or like the resources, I want them to be at the building. You know what I mean? I really think that is important. And I really hope, because when I went to school, there was like maybe 3 guidance counselors. I don't even know if they had social work backgrounds or anything like that. Like, I'm not really sure. So I do think there just needs to be way more support for everybody. And I hope that we can all like start working together too, you know, like I do know, like it's been, you know, I mean, it's so easy to point fingers. And I just want to say, as someone who grew up with a mom who went through trauma, all of my siblings, like that was almost like a family way. It's like if someone wronged you or something went wrong, we had to find someone to blame. It's always like, oh, that's to blame.
Right.
You know what? No, I chose to go into this situation. I made a choice. Like, so I don't know. I know that also comes from trauma too, is all that finger pointing, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the kids, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because been working with a few groups, one of them being a Jewish Healthcare Foundation out there in Pittsburgh, where you are. and working with some of the youth out there, and who you will actually hear from on May 19th. A lot of them feel what you were saying about having social workers in schools and things of that nature, mental health curriculum, like all of those things. Like when I was growing up and going to school, we had a health class that the gym teacher taught, and the gym teacher wasn't really interested in teaching. Like, so, you know, you sat on, he threw on this video. Like the most I remember about health class in high school was the miracle of life. And that was because I saw a baby born in school, and that was like the thing. Like, so yeah, it's a lot. I feel like that has to be done around that. A mental health curriculum in school would be amazing to have in a health class or something like that. But I digress. I'll get off my soapbox right now.
Yeah, Jamal, I get a chance to get on the soapbox. Okay, so many of the people that we've had as speakers in the past couple of years have all told us the same thing. And I know right here in Philadelphia, not sure about where everywhere else in the state, but I know right here in Philadelphia, next week we're going to be voting. And if you feel strongly about your schools or what is needed, find out who's running and contact that person and support that person and vote for that person. And I don't care who you vote for. Sincerely, I want everyone to vote because it is a privilege and we don't always recognize it as such. Let's get out there and tell them what we need.
Agreed.
Okay, off my soapbox.
Agreed. All right, all soapboxes have been put away.
But I did see that Philadelphia might vote on mental health education in schools, and I was that made me so excited.
So Angie asked, and this is an interesting question. I've never thought about this. Are there adults that are simply not candidates for therapy? People who are too traumatized to dive deep into introspection, and how you would suggest therapy for this type of person. If they're not responsive to therapy suggestions, what are some things that can take place in a conversation? This is a mom-daughter relationship. Mom is retired and isolated in upstate New York.
Wow, that's so interesting because a couple of the people had reached out to me. It was for their parent to go to trauma therapy, or it was an adult who's older than me reaching out like, hey, I've never had this and I'd like to go. My mother had such a bad experience as a kid being in front of social workers because she would lie to CYS when they would say, hey, how come this is going on? How come you've been hospitalized as a 6-year-old with bleeding ulcers? Like, what's going on in your house? And my mom would just lie to their face and be like, oh, everything's perfect. My mom cooks dinner and my dad's home every night and I love my life. And they'd be like, okay, go back out with your mom and dad. And my mother, as a 6-year-old, fundamentally was like, they're all idiots. Therapists are, her word, jagoffs. I don't trust them. So she had a very anti-therapy attitude my whole life. So when I was going through traumas, or even when my middle school was like, hey, we're putting your kid in therapy, my mom was like, listen to me. You're not going into therapy. It's my kid. So it was like very anti. She went through so much trauma. When my father died and she nursed him to death, she went through a major depression and she had hit such rock bottom that she finally started to get therapy. She didn't continue with it, but I will say that she then became open to me going to therapy and open to these topics. So I feel like getting through to her, it all was like, I never thought that could happen. So I think anything's possible. But I think with me and my mom, how I was able to get her to see it was like, so this is what happened to me. Mommy, didn't this happen to you? Don't you feel this way? It's almost like that Oprah book. Like what happened to you? It was me coming to her in just like an honest way, and also coming to her and like, I'm your kid and this is what happened. And I know it wasn't your fault. And, and just having that compassion and understanding. But I do hear what you're saying. There are some people that are so lost that it's hard to get through to them. But I mean, something has to get through to them, right? I mean, if it's a matter of them not eating or something, I mean, someone's going to get involved. And this idea that therapy isn't for everyone, I don't agree with that. I think it's the same as going to see a doctor, getting your blood pressure checked, getting blood work. You got to check on your brain. You have to, like, no one is exempt from that, no matter. And I will say personally, with my mother, who didn't get the help she needed her whole life, when it became go time and she's now having vascular surgeries and major orthopedic surgeries and being put on pills, and now she doesn't have that control that she's held on to since she was a little tough kid, this warrior, the survivor, she was losing all of that. And mental health came flying at my mother. And I would say to the doctors, she was never treated for her trauma. This is what's good. She overreacts. This is why this is happening. And thank God my mother had me as an advocate. But mental health really reared its ugly head at the end of my mother's life. I mean, to the point, at one point she was in a hospital, a doctor was trying to cauterize something in her nose, and he was getting so rough. My mother, who was sick as a dog and had wounds all over her body, took this doctor and threw him across the room, and we got kicked out of a hospital because my mom's trauma had never been dealt with, and it manifested in that moment. Like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't give up on your mom. Like, try to get them to get some help, because it could manifest later on. And I guess just maybe coming at them as their child, you know, and maybe talking to them from that point. That's how it kind of worked for me and my mom. But I do understand when, I mean, it's a subject that some, like an entire generation is just like, get over it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they all act like they nailed World War II, but meanwhile they beat all their kids, and that's why we're all messed up, because you beat your kids, and now and then they get it together, older generations. Yeah, it's a lot.
So Laura just posted in the chat, do you feel that they have to be at a place that they are ready to accept help? And if they are not, what steps do you feel would be of help?
I think I can answer this pretty honestly, and maybe in a way that I'm going to get through. Here's what I'm going to say. So I started this therapy. Now, keep in mind, I've only done like bipolar therapy, grief therapy. I never have done this trauma therapy. And one of the first things my therapist wanted me to do was ground myself. I don't know anyone out there who's ever done this. What 5 things in the room do you see? What 4 things in the room do you hear? What 3 things in the room do you feel? What 2 things in the room do you smell? And what 1 thing in the room do you taste, right? It helps you ground. And so she had me do this, and I hated it. I was furious. I was like, this woman, I hate this woman. My next session, I was like, hey, lady, I got bipolar. I don't need your hippy dippy crap. I need a real therapist. We're in a global trauma, and you want me to freaking look around the room. I mean, I literally called her hippy dippy, told her to take her stupid therapy, shove it up her butt. Like, I was not even nice at all to this woman. Then I had something happen, and she was like, if you had tried grounding, I bet that might have helped. And I was like, rrr. So then I had another thing come up. I'm like, try the stupid ground. And it worked. And I was like, it worked. All right, let's see what other hippy dippy stuff that she had. And from there, it took one thing working, and then it would be another thing working, and then it would be another thing working. And I swear to God, I have never been someone who can meditate, who can I meditate now. I do yoga. They've been telling me to do yoga since I was 16 years old. I'm like, I can't do yoga. I do yoga. We do these sessions, these EMDR sessions, where I have gone back into my childhood. I have fixed childhood Gabby in a way where I'm like, no, now I see you, baby. We're good. You were always strong and kind, baby. You're good. I don't see the stuck points I had are gone in certain situations. I can go back to my meditations, and I see 6-year-old Gabby in a blue onesie laying starfish style on my carpet with sunbeams coming in. I've gone there. My therapist even said yo, I gotta be for real. When I started with you, I never thought we could get here. You make me relax hearing your meditation. She's like, this is amazing. So yeah, that's what I just want to say. I was the person who was like, no, I'm not doing this. This is so, you're going to put clickers in my hand. Yeah, clickers in my hand is going to change. It changed my life. I've never been this happy. I mean that. I've never been this mentally solid. So yeah, I was that person. And here I am now. I think it takes one thing to work, one thing to be like, that actually worked. Okay. Give me more hippie stuff.
See what a little grounding can do, Gab?
Yep. Oh, changed my life.
Deborah just posted a question. With my parents who are still not interested in therapy, she shared what she's gone through as appropriate, and she is more grounded, and that is influencing her relationships with their parents. So it's a shift for the relationship and them.
Oh,
So she shared that little bit in the Q&A, and I thank you for sharing that, Deborah, because it is. I mean, once you become more open to what it is that's happening in therapy, there is a shift that happens, and I've experienced it myself, because I wasn't big on therapy for a long time, mainly because I could never find a therapist that I could relate to. But it's probably a few years before my daughter passed away, and I started going to therapy, and I had found this really great guy who was awesome, and he changed my life. He truly did. Like I was down in the dumps, and talking with him every Thursday night for like 3 years was what really helped me get out of that. So it's literally a shift that you see and feel that happens within yourself, and hopefully within other people if they take that journey with you. So I totally agree. Melissa wanted to know, and this was a more of a question about who you present to and the age group, Gab. So she knows that you work in schools, and she was wondering, do you deal with the population 0 to 5?
okay. Yeah. So is this like specifically with the anti-bully show, or because like with the anti-bully, we mostly, I would say we've done everything. We've gone from kindergarten to AARP meetings. I will say, however, like the music part of it in high schools has never gone really well. So usually there's a high school that's like, we're going to book the Josh and Gab show. Josh pulls me aside and goes, you're going to do 45 minutes of stand-up comedy, right? And I'll play like one song. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'll do. And I just kind of go out and do, yeah. With mental health though, I have done high schools and I have done middle schools. And I even did as young as an entire 6th grade at a specific school. They were having some issues in the 6th grade. And to this day, it is still maybe my best mental health thing I've ever done, just because the way the kids opened up and were telling the traumas of their life that the school had no idea was even going on. I think it was really rewarding for all of us involved. And I just felt really, I'm always like, it doesn't take much for me to tell you my life story, but when someone comes back with theirs, it's really touching to me. You know what I mean? It makes me, I don't know, it's valuable, and it really means a lot. So I really appreciate when.
So Melissa, she expounded on her question. She says she works in early intervention, and she's seeing a lot of trauma with young children, which is why she asked the question. Because the early intervention, 0 to 5, that age group, up to kindergarten, and probably she's saying more for the staff than the children. So just to give you some context.
Okay, yeah, no, I would definitely, I've definitely presented to staff, teachers, everybody, peer support specialists, which now I want to become one. Yeah, very. I didn't even know that was a thing. The only class I can find right now is in the beginning of August, and it's like, I think in Central PA, but I'm still looking.
I just had a question come through chat. Rhonda wanted to know if you ever read or listened to Brene Brown, who I also love.
Yeah.
Who works primarily with vulnerability. And she said, if so, she wanted to know how her work has helped you.
I only know of her because my therapist is a huge fan and is always like raving about that. But I have never read anything. These are like, I got this as a gift from my best friend, What Happened to You? And then Homecoming, just like maybe a month ago, I saw the Dr. Thema Bryant. I was like, that speaks to me. I want this book. But no, I have not read anything.
Okay. You are now getting.
Jamal?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not the expert here today, but I tried to get Brene Brown to be one of our speakers, and oh boy, could we not afford her. But
just a little bit. We were off by a little bit.
I've got Brene Brown light today, and let me tell you,
but
we're all doing okay.
She's great. And her latest book is about all of the different emotions that we feel. And as I started reading it, I thought, oh yeah. And to know how many additional emotions that we all feel. And for my lunch break today, I listened to her most recent blog with Father Richard Rohr, who's an Episcopal priest and theologian. And it was so beautiful. They are looking at the spirit of what is religion, and that we're not focused on love. We're focused on God as this person who's going to judge you. And oh my goodness, no, that's not the one. And so and yes, and she's on HBO Max right now. I just saw her first in that series. Anybody, any chance you have, anything Brene Brown, go there. Thank you.
Well,
little plug for Brene Brown by Nancy. Gab, I have a couple of questions from the early intervention crowd. One is from Darshell. She says, I work with a 2-year-old bully who seems to be very angry for a toddler. I'm trying to figure out how to present to his parent. Do you have any suggestions?
Oh, yeah, because man, I get it. That's what I guess I call myself a fly on the wall, because it's like, I'm not a parent, I'm not a teacher, but I see both your sides, and I know this isn't easy, because it isn't. I had a friend of mine who's a teacher, and she needed to tell a parent some news they might not want to hear, and the parent reacted in such a way that their response was to try to get the teacher fired. And they're like, whoa, I was just trying to help. So I get it is a scary thing, but what would I say? Well, I might do it in a way where, I talk to mom and dad and be like, hey, we noticed Steve been pushing kids in school. Does Steve have an older brother who might be pushing him at home, and it's a learned behavior that Steve's picking up on? Because I don't think Steve's a mean kid. 2-year-olds, what do they know about being mean? Or something, maybe do it in a way. I just find with people, and I mean, the more honey you pour, the more they can take the hard medicine they're about to swallow. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have been doing things in my stand-up routine where I'll bring up a subject in the middle of a rural area, right? And I know they're not going to like what I just said. And I'm like, oh, and then I just rephrase it in a way where they can understand. And they're like, oh, I agree with that. And I'm like, cool. All right, let's moving on. So yeah, I do find if you can really do it in a way that is, they're not doing anything wrong. You're giving them the grace. You're giving grace. Like, you're not saying, hey, are you guys violent in the house, or your kid's a bully? More like, oh, I happen to notice that this is happening. They're only 2. So maybe, are they watching a show where is on Coco Melon? Is somebody punching somebody? Or I don't know. I would definitely, the biggest smile you can give and just pour all that honey over your 2-year-olds beating up people.
I really enjoy the fact that you stated it in that way, because what it does is it allows the parents to think about what it is that their kid might be doing, or what they're watching, or if they're playing rough with people, and it's just kind of common, but you're not blaming them.
No blaming.
And because the minute parents feel blamed, everything shuts down and they go into defense mode, and they're not hearing anything. So yes, I think that's a good way to handle that. And then Tamara asks, how do you deal with children between the ages of 2 and 4 that are experiencing grief from the loss of a sibling? Do you think they would be too young for grief counseling? Your opinion.
Interesting. Honestly, I don't know that they would be too young for grief counseling. And I only say this, and I don't personally know. Well, that's not true. I had a cousin who was 4 when his brother, who was about to be 2, had passed away. And I know that he never got the help he needed. And he, to this day, would tell you that it is he wished he probably would have had some help there. I just know, like, a little example I'm just going to give, and where I think kids do have, like, their emotional IQ is already formed by 2, is that, so my little godson is a really big part of my life. And we just found out 2 days ago that his dad got COVID. So now I don't get to see them for 10 days, which is sad for me, but they are also now in lockdown. So they went outside to play because they thought, well, that could be safe. He's outside. But he has 2 little neighbor girlfriends who came out and they couldn't wait to go see him. And his mom had to go, oh, I'm sorry, girls. He was exposed to COVID. You can't come play with him. He's 2, doesn't fully understand words, but knew his friends came out, saw him, and then immediately went inside and ran away from him. And when I say that he was inconsolable, according to his mother, for hours afterwards, like, no, and this is just 2 friends he didn't get to see for an hour. So I cannot imagine, like, I'm already worried when their family dog passes away, he's going to have a very big reaction to that because he thinks that's like a member of his family. So I don't know. I think you can. I mean, he knows how to make happy faces, sad faces. I do think there could be a level of, I mean, obviously you can't do an hour session with a 2-year-old, but you could maybe do a 15-minute little emotion, like getting them to understand emotions, things like that. I definitely think it's possible. Yeah. Oh, and I just want to say too, I saw somebody put something like about bullies or 2-year-olds being bullies, and I couldn't read the whole thing, but I just kind of want to say this really quickly. And I think this is what's different about my anti-bully show is that, like, when I go to a school, I always say, like, I'm not here just for the kids who are currently getting bullied. And I'm not here for the kids who just need to learn about bullies. I'm here for the kids who are bullies, because just because you're a bully right now doesn't mean that you have to continue to be a bully. And also, I'd like to know what's going on, because maybe there's more behind this whole story as to why you're acting out. I don't just believe that you're some mean kid. I bet something else is going on, and that's why you're acting up. So I'm here for you just as much. So I just want to say that, like, I don't even like the term bully. I don't even like to say anti-bully anymore. I always say pro-empathy, just because I don't think that helps labeling children. And often a kid who is acting out is a kid who's going through severe trauma at home. And I'd much rather find out what's going on and that we can help this kid rather than label them a bully and you know, make them think they're a bully the rest of their lives. Like, that can be a term that gets stuck on somebody, and kids shouldn't be labeled. You know what I mean? Like, that's the cool thing. You're a basketball player in 3rd grade. You like soccer in 4th grade, 5th grade, you've turned to music, you know, like, that's growing up, that's changing. And we've got to give kids the space.
I love that term, pro empathy. I love that. I love that. I think the woman was saying that a 2-year-old can't be a bully because their brain isn't wired that way.
Right.
There's more of impulses and control, and those kind of things, and which I totally agree with. But that pro empathy thing, that's going to stick with me. I love that. I love that. Being mindful of time, is now 3:57. We want to thank you, Gab. It was a great presentation. As always, you bring tremendous energy, and it's so appreciated in times like these. So we thank you so much for your presentation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Anytime. Maybe come back, please. Our next presentation is "The Pandemic Has Created a Mental Health Crisis, Schools, Mental Health, and What Teens Have to Say," by an inspiring panel of teens from the PA Youth Advocacy Network. I mentioned a little bit about them earlier. It's a network of teens and youth serving our partner organizations in Pennsylvania. Join us on Thursday, May 19th from 3 to 4:30. Please note the change in time. We will not be starting at 2:30 that day. We'll be starting at 3 to allow the youth to get home from school, get settled, and logged on and everything. So we will be starting at 3 and ending at 4:30 that day. But we look forward to seeing you there. Nancy, any last words? You're on mute.
I am so speechless. And even though I interrupted many times with things to say, I'm feeling quite speechless at the moment. We have had an extraordinary experience here today. We have been able to engage people, and well, I say we, I'm going to say Gab has been able to engage people, have them talking to us in the chat, have them sharing with us in the chat. And for anyone who's still on, I want you to know that on Monday, I'm going to send out an email to everybody who's registered, and I'm going to include a copy of the chat because there are so many resources that have been shared in there. I want to be sure that everybody has a chance to see them. I am so proud of Gab. I had an opportunity to work with her when I want to say she was just starting in this area, which is not exactly true. But when she needed somebody to say to her, Gab, you can do this, and let me show you how. And I was able to share with her. And then I have had in return a most incredible, exquisite gift of what she knows and what she has shared with us today. And I'm so grateful for that. And I also want to make another, this isn't about that, but that in June, for the questions that were coming up about early childhood, we're going to have speakers on the topic of early childhood. And I think we're going to answer some of the questions that came up today. I would like to say that Gab is not a psychiatrist or a psychologist and has answered us from her personal experience, which I will say is often better than what I hear from therapists. So I would thank Gab for that. And because I wasn't paying as close attention to chat as I could, I want to be sure everybody has a link for the evaluation. So I'm going to stay on here a couple of minutes to make sure everybody has what they need. If you need something, throw it in the chat for me. Gabby, thank you. Love you.
Nancy, thank you. Jamal, both of you. Like, I truly consider you friends. So I hope to make it to your side of the state so we can actually like have a meal together.
Yes.
Well, actually, I'll be over there soon.
I'm taking you to dinner, Jamal.
In June, I will be over there with my partners, Youth Move PA. They are going to be putting on some wellness days out there. So I'm actually going to be going to Presque Isle State Park on June 12th. And then I'll be going to, hold on, let me make sure I get this right. On June 14th, it'll be Presque Isle State Park. And that's up in Erie, I believe. And on June 16th, I'll be going to Keystone State Park, which is down by you in Allegheny County. So
Oh my
I'll be
gosh.
over there for like that whole week up in the north, in over on the west side, north and sort of central southwest, I guess. So I'll be over there.
Okay, I'm jealous.
We better see each other, Jamal, because like if we don't, I'm mad already.
No, I'm definitely hitting you up.
You better, I mean this, you better hit me up. Nancy, why don't you just come out and visit?
I am going to do that soon. You said you'd cook for me, so I'm going to take you up on it.
I'm a good
cook.
See?
One good thing
I was about to say, some of
Italian.
that Italian cuisine.
Yeah. Yes.
Whatever you want.
I'm part Italian, love Italian food. Let's do that.
Right. I got you. My pesto is the besto, and I mean that. Really.
Great. Wow.
Oh my goodness. I love
just
you guys.
want to say too, Gab, that you had a lot of advice in the chat about becoming a CPS.
Oh, good.
So when we send you the chat, you can go through that. I think someone said they had some classes coming up in Erie maybe soon.
That would be perfect.
So
That would be good.
I think Erie and Crawford were saying that they had classes from what I saw. It was a while back in the chat, but when we send you the chat, you can go through it and see.
I saw a couple of them too, but they blew
Laura
by so
just
fast.
said in Crawford.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, no, that's even my therapist was like, yes, you should be a peer support specialist. Of course you should do that. I'm like, okay, if you sign off, then I think we're good to go.
Yeah, listen, I went through the class. I am a certified CPS. That week or two, I can't remember, it was 2 weeks, was beyond anything that I could ever think that it would be. Like, I didn't think it would change my life in that way, the way that it did, but just the people, the focus on, I mean, just being empathetic and getting to know, and we're not the professionals, we're just here as a shoulder to kind of lean on and help you maybe talk through some things. It's really it was life altering for me. It really was, So I think you would really enjoy it.
You make it so much even more special to me, Jamal. When you talk, like the last time you said it and this time, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. I need this for me. And because I want to do, I'd like to help more.
Oh, look, and you just got an invitation to the Allegheny Family Network, and they're meeting Monday in Rock Bottom. Oh,
I
you'll have
worked
to
with the
go.
Allegheny Family Network. They had me.
Oh, cool.
I performed for them last year. Yeah, virtually.
Nice.
Well, it's here in the chat. Reach out to them.
Holly just put some Pittsburgh slang in the chat, and it's cracking me up. Now Yins want to make me be a CPS.
That was a typo.
We're all doing it.
Okay. Well,
Like I don't want you to go. It's like no.
no,
You've worked
I
so
don't
hard
want to
on
go
this.
either. This is great. Well, I hope that I didn't interrupt you too many times, Gab.
You didn't interrupt me at all. If you did, I didn't hear it. I just kept going. I'm so sorry.
Oh, good.
I just kept, I ended up talking much longer than I that's the problem. If you don't stop me, I just keep going. I'm so sorry.
No, you have nothing to be sorry about. Everything I think was wonderful. And I can't believe we didn't have one single tech issue through the whole thing. How amazing is that?
See, miracles do happen, Nancy.
That's right. The tech gods were with us.
I've had workers out front all day and I'm like, oh God, please don't let them hit the internet. Don't let them hit, like I've been just, well, but back we made it through.
They just started mowing grass like soon as I logged on at 2:00. I was like, great.
Oh, somebody's offering you a job. Oh my goodness, Gab.
How did that happen? I'm not even qualified yet. I'm in.
Okay.
Oh, this is so much fun. Thank you so much.
Thank
well,
you.
soon we'll start talking about next year.
I would love that.
Sure.
And what topic, where are we going to go next year?
Well, it would be cool if maybe I can actually go into the schools and do what we originally thought and get the kids we actually just present what they say.
Yeah, we did talk about that. I had forgotten about that.
I still love Gabby's Clubhouse was still an idea that I was so sad Omicron took from us. So I'm like, maybe this year we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Let's focus on that. Let's focus on Gabby's Clubhouse for next year.
So I would love the kids to talk.
Well, it's 4:07, so I'm going to stop recording. Thank you all who are still left for attending.